Okay, hopefully by now you've listened to the EP or the first half of the album since it's been already out for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't know, by the time I release this video, it's gonna be 2 or 3 weeks. But anyway, the reason why I split the album this way and release it the first half first instead of dropping the whole album as a whole is there are a couple of reasons. Well, first of all is marketing, and it's easier to get people's attention onto the individual tracks this way. But aside from that business aspect of the project, which I know you don't really want to hear about, is that I also want to give you guys a glimpse into the album and open it up to you gradually, because it took me a whole year just to complete the narrative of the album. I basically, and there are also stories that come from me. I had to, well, basically experience life a bit to get enough materials and enough reflections on the ideas themselves in order to transform them into these songs, you know. And furthermore, these tracks in the first half are also stories that come from the 20-year-old me in the past. So it makes more sense to package the stories this way and let them go first on their own as I close this chapter of my life, both as a person and as an artist. Let's put that aside for now. There's still the intro track that I haven't really told you anything about at all, even though you've been hearing it. Yes, you've been hearing the main theme of it throughout the series already. So let's start with the title first. Why did I name it Chasing Another Disappointment when the EP is called Chasing Another Promise? Well, beside the obvious reason to ironically contrast the title, there's a lot more to it. Let's recall the narrative sequence or the plots that we worked out earlier for the entire album. So we're making a promise with the Son of Son is the Sun. And that promise is then broken, which leads us right to the disappointment that we're dealing with in the first half of the album, or this EP here. Now stay with me here. Similar to how dealing with a disappointment is a process of chasing another promise, to make a promise is also a process of chasing a disappointment. This actually introduces the concept of time as well. Well, think about it. When you make the promise, it's when you show your commitment to something in the future, right? But we do not live in the future. We live in the present. So the present is the only thing we have control over. So we actually don't know if that promise that we made is going to be fulfilled in the future or not. Therefore, essentially, we still have that possibility of either the promise is going to be fulfilled or the promise is going to be broken, which leads us to disappointment. We actually don't know which one we're chasing, and we just have one direction that we're going. It's an endless cycle, essentially. And like I said, because it's a cycle, it's just like a circle. No matter which direction you're going, you're going to end up in the same place anyway. So yeah, that's why I love this concept so much, because not only it's about promise and disappointment, it's also about time and what we actually have control over. Because I also struggle a lot with that, and I feel like a lot of people also do the same. We always agonize the past, what could have been better, what should have been better, and we get anxious about the future, like what can we do, what will we become, and we neglect the present, the only thing that we have control over that can actually change both of them, the past and the future. Strange, right? Well, like I said, because we don't know which one we're chasing, either a promise or a disappointment, let's just assume that we're chasing a promise, because that's what we made, right? We made a promise, so we're chasing that promise, because no one's willingly chasing a disappointment or something negative. That also explains the bright and adventurous and almost innocent sound of the theme that you hear in the track, and as well as the start of every episode. It's weird saying this about something I wrote, but the theme itself sounds this way because of that. Now, to take you behind the making of this track, I actually had to divide the track into 3 sections. And the first section is almost like a cinematic soundtrack of running steps, heavy breathing, and the voices in my head, because I want to make it really clear that this is me chasing something that I have no clue about. Okay, so here's the session of the track. So because I already had a clear vision of what I wanted it to sound like, I already had to like hunt down the samples that I want to use and then, layer them together. So we started with this running step sample that I faded in. Sounds like that. And I also panned it onto the left side. And then we have this kind of underwater effects. Yeah. Because I did say I want to chase something uncertain. I also want to bring that unclear soundscape to this intro as well. I'm either running or I'm being drowned in the water. It's meant to be confusing. And then after that, we got all of this narration that I name it, or the voices in my head, which I recorded in, and then scoop out all of the lows and the high, boost the freak out the mid to make it sound like a telephone. I promise. See, it's just about enough. I promise. And they're all intentional. I'll tell you about it later. And then so these dramatic one.
I told you, I can do it. I'll make it happen.
And then this one as well.
I'm not gonna make it at this rate.
Put some reverb on that. Then there's this one too.
I told you already.
Yeah, it was quite fun recording that actually. You kind of had to like act out my voice a little. And when it ends, we got this.
I promise.
So one of them, I actually drowned it in a delay and reverb, only to contrast the final one that's completely dry. It's just my voice.
Promise.
Straight into the microphone, like right up to it. So after all of that confusion, we get to the second half, which looks a lot simpler. Just 3 tracks. The second section of that track is actually a rip-off of a song that I wrote in, when was it? 2019. Yeah, 2019. 5 years ago. It's from one of the first songs that I wrote when I first started learning songwriting. And what I had in the track is actually only half of the chorus, because I want to kind of keep it short, and the lyrics are so straight to the point there, so I didn't really felt the need to have the full chorus in there. But yeah, I'll sing you the full chorus. I promise, oh I promise, I'll come back home sometimes, I'll come back home one day. I promise, I will keep my promise, I'll come back to dry those tears, and I'll see your smile once again. So if it wasn't obvious enough, the song is titled Promise. And that's also how I ended up looking for it after 5 years and recycle it in this track. The third section is the one that has the main theme that you hear all the time, is also repurposed from an old material of mine as well. It came from a beat that I made for fun last year. And there's also a minor section to that theme as well, but I didn't really see how it would fit in this track, so I only I only ripped off the major section and used it here. So as you can see, this intro interestingly consists of a lot of old materials of mine as well, which I find quite meaningful to the concept of the album too. Especially, I would say, especially is how I wrote Promise and No Promises 5 years apart like that. It's really, how do I put it? It really captures my growth as a person and an artist as well. Yeah, from how I keep yearning for to make a promise and to realize that no promises is the way to go. Okay, enough about the intro track. Let's talk about the track listing a little bit, because it's also one of the reasons why I love albums so much. And aside from the music making, of course, it also features the artist curating of their own music. So the storyline that I created in the first half of the album here is like this. We're starting with the Son of Sunisa-san, where we make a promise that is so ridiculously naive that it's bound to be broken. Then onto the intro track, where we chase a promise that is actually a disappointment in hindsight. And because of that, it causes some cognitive dissonance that leads us to overthink, hence overthinking as the third track. And then right after that, we get the different shades of disappointment through Never Meant to Be, Don't Love Me, and ultimately Clouds Aren't Real, the epitome of disappointment. And we close it off with Johnny, I'm Sorry, to eventually apologize and move on. Also, drop the hint for the second half. Although I'm the one that made these songs and presenting them to you in this way, please, and I really mean it, please don't take my interpretation and my curation of them too seriously, because there are truly no right or wrong answers in just music and art in general, which is why I also love them so much. And in fact, I encourage you to interpret these songs of mine in ways that feels the most relatable and comfortable to you, because if that's how I made these songs as well. It's to extract my personal perspective and experience and turn them into these songs. And I feel like if you can do the opposite with it, and by listening to it and extract your own experience out of them, I feel like if that can resonate with you in that sense, then I think I've succeeded. Really? With that being said, I'm pretty sure my interpretation is not the best either. Anyway, next week we'll start diving into the second half of the album, which I actually can't wait to share with you. In the meantime, go listen to the EP to your heart's content. Until then, see ya.